It was 1986 when the reactor core at the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl melted down. It spread enough nuclear fallout to force the evacuation of 6 square miles around the site, which still remain unoccupied to this day. One of the men tasked with the cleanup of the largest radioactive disaster since Nagasaki was a Soviet Air Force colonel by the name of Vladimir Klitschko Sr. With little protective equipment and the tacit understanding that he was facing a great personal service, Klitschko still did his duty and likely saved thousands of lives. While the cancer that ultimately killed him took time to run its course, Klitschko raised his sons as soldiers in the fall of the Soviet Union. By the time Vitali and Wladimir were teens, their father had instilled an iron discipline in them. They were educated, each earning their PhDs. Each spoke multiple languages. Each became avid chess players. But from the time they went through puberty and towered over most men, it was clear the brothers Klitschko were built for combat sports. Each developed their own style. Vitali was the more natural fighter with an iron chin. Wladimir was the more refined boxer. The Klitschkos go pro at the end of 1996, but not before making a promise to their mother to never fight each other as professionals.
And we don't want to break our mother's heart. And we promise our mother, when we start to box, we will never fight against each other.
While an understandable stance morally, it put the rest of the heavyweight division in an awkward place, because every other boxer would have to do something that the Klitschkos wouldn't: fight a Klitschko brother. Or if you were really good, you'd have to fight both. Chris Bird was the first to deal with this. Chris was a former middleweight who found he preferred fighting bigger men.
The media people, the judges, the photographers, and others.
He was a slick southpaw with a beautiful defense.
Stick with his head hunting. You see Klitschko here.
Vitali was already WBO champion.
Gets him in the corner.
He had a perfect record and a 100% KO rate. While Vitali was trying to bomb out his outsized opponent, Bird came out slipping and ripping, landing clean counters.
10 amateur fights. Right hand.
Vitali ate them like a bowl of borscht and kept coming.
Them and perhaps breaking down their will. Jimmy Thunder in Connecticut, the classic. Bird, who landed 6 out of 17 power punches and has a chance of working out.
I was surprised how well he took that punch, because that was
All previous opponents he connected at around the 46
target, because it's too hard to do that.
Until from nowhere, Vitali sat on his stool and refused to rise, complaining about his shoulder.
Just see, Vitali Klitschko, he elects not to go on, with his left hand apparently too damaged to continue.
The first loss of Vitali's career was caused by a torn rotator cuff.
It is time for the
wily
revenge of
southpaw,
the brother.
Chris Bird. The revenge of the brothers, says Jimmy Lennon Jr.
As a reward for his upset, Chris Bird was immediately made to fight Wladimir. Thus is the real problem with fighting the Klitschkos.
For revenge, Vladimir's golden opportunity to reinstate the name Klitschko to the WBO heavyweight title, and pride on the line here. Having to show those a little.
Any fighter with the style to be able to trouble one would be at a style disadvantage to the other.
Good movement.
His punching is feeling good, I'm afraid.
Bird played with Vitali's straightforward slugging, but when faced with a more disciplined and distance-based game plan from Vlad, Chris got stuck outside eating punches all night.
Seventh frame.
In the third round, he didn't want the better, but I thought he's
Pumping right hand. And he's picking up right foot. Chris Bird beat his brother fair and square, and now good right hand. That's exactly the shot I was thinking of.
Until in round 9, when a tired Bird fell to the earth.
Right hand though over the top, and down goes.
Chris would carry on to the foregone conclusion.
Something like this to Bird. Right hand from Klitschko, and Bird wobbles, and he's down with another right, cupping over the head. The crowd on their feet, they know they've got a new champion. He punches the air, Wladimir Klitschko.
And the new WBO heavyweight champion of the world.
The next big break came from a bit of lucky scheduling. Lennox Lewis was the lineal champion. Lennox was scheduled to face Kirk Johnson in a title defense. Vitali also had a fight scheduled for that card. When Kirk pulled out with an injury, Vitali stepped up to save the main event.
Looking for that right awkward, but sometimes effective, feeling the strength of Klitschko too. Gets there with a
It was a classic slugging heavyweight war.
It's a good start this by Klitschko. Started well, but can Lewis get his jab going? Oh, there's a big right hand. Taking this at 2 weeks' notice and gets it with the right hand, and Lewis wants to hold. It's Klitschko has got him a bit wobbly here. Lewis is in trouble. Can Lewis turn this around? Best yet from Lewis. But Klitschko is trying to gamble with big shots.
Vitali was getting the better of it until Lewis threw a right that opened a wound on Vitali's eye.
As he turns around, Klitschko is cut by the left eye. There'll be tremendous excitement in this.
Vitali toughed it out and kept coming at the champion.
Lewis just looking and loading up an awful lot, Lennox. That's it.
Lost, doesn't he? Lewis looking a bit troubled and disorganised. He just seemed to glance in seconds of the round. But Klitschko breathes heavily as he goes back to the corner, and his face is a mess. Good shots again.
It was at the end of round 6, Lennox drops all his weight into an uppercut that would have stopped anybody else, but not Vitali.
Lewis, absolute peach. I think that uppercut has caused blood. Pulls Lewis back across the ring.
That might be true. And if he is, Lennox will be feeling it more.
Oh, there's the uppercut again.
When Lennox collapses depleted onto his stool, just as Vitali thinks he's got him, the doctor steps in and ends the fight. While Vitali was furious, the cut took nearly 60 stitches to close.
They should be. Lennox.
Lennox would retire immediately after the fight and call Vitali his toughest opponent. Meanwhile, Wladimir was making the 6th defense of his WBO belt against a South African southpaw by the name of Corey Sanders.
Forcing the stoppage late that night. With left hand there, the stance. Wladimir.
Sanders was a brutal puncher with the speed to close the gap on Vlad.
Looking for left hand instead. Nice, gets that little confidence, but then with some real devil.
Sanders, that is troubling Klitschko.
When Sanders got in close and landed an undefended left, Vlad crumpled and barely made the count.
And will he get out from that? Left hand from Corey Sanders. We might have a sensation here. Wladimir Klitschko.
When he got up, Corey swarmed to finish.
Enough. Are the hopes of Wladimir Klitschko up? Sanders will fancy here that he can score a knockdown, and he's got him again. Straight left hand this time. Down he goes. It's going to have to be stopped, I think, because Klitschko is rocking and rolling all over the ring. He goes down again, and it is stopped all over round
the right time, and there's a very happy man.
For me, it means welcome to the boxing business, because all big champions was losing the fights, and so it's happening. And of course, I will give my best, and I will have a rematch with Corey Sanders, and then I will show what I can do.
Having laid out the very large little brother, Corey naturally had to face Big Bro next.
This fight tonight could be heaven or it could be hell for Vitali Klitschko. Reaching across the top with the left, Klitschko's in there to the degree that he did a year ago in Germany.
While no first round with Corey was easy, that rock of a chin kept Vitali standing through the first stanza.
With a minute to go in round one. Now the land of Sanders, and was the case last year for younger brother. Hard left hand. Staggers Sanders tries to follow up. 10 seconds to go in the round. And it's not going to be called a knockdown.
Vitali was able to turn the tide and slow the southpaw down.
But he could be getting ready to lash out with one of those.
Wearing away at each other. All he is doing depends on one punch.
Big left hand from Sanders. Stuns Vitali. Klitschko backing up in trouble. Gets hit again. Hard right hand by Vitali, and he steps away before Sanders can set the left. Two more. Sanders. And some lefts. Big right hand by Klitschko. The second wins. It appears that Vitali's in front of him.
Before long, Sanders wound up on the losing end of a slugfest with his brother's keeper.
Sanders flailing like a drunken sailor there.
He's ready to go, Jim.
And Vitali Klitschko is going to try to finish it right here. Unbelievable show of courage by Corey Sanders.
What keeps him up? That's it.
Finally, the
Vitali, Dr. Iron Fist, Klitschko.
We have to dream together with my brother to take all heavyweights belt in our family.
2004 was an election year in Ukraine. The so-called Orange Revolution was playing out as Vitali was training to take on Danny Williams.
Thousands of pro-democracy Ukrainians in the streets today protested against the results of the presidential election, pitting their candidate, the West-leaning challenger Viktor Yushchenko, against the pro-Moscow Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych.
Doctors confirmed that opposition candidate Viktor Yushchenko was poisoned during the campaign.
While Vitali Klitschko is concentrating on Danny Williams, his thoughts are also with his countrymen in Ukraine, the former Soviet Republic.
But sometimes a fight is more than a fight to a fighter. And Vitali Klitschko deserves all the credit in the world at this critical juncture in his career when he's trying to separate himself from all the other heavyweights with heavyweight championship claims out there, to invest himself in a cause that's even bigger than his big self. I think it's the type of thing, Jim, that if he comes out of this as the champion still, that will inure to his credit among American boxing fans.
On the night of the fight, Vitali wore an orange tassel to the ring.
good right hand by Klitschko. Again, he lands over the top.
To make it through this, it'd be hard for Klitschko.
And Klitschko lands a big right hand shot. Vitali's got a chance for a first round KO here. Down goes Williams.
And Williams does. You see Vitali take a step back and throw a hook by Danny.
Soundly thrashed Danny and told the world he was returning home to campaign for Ukrainian democracy.
Champion of the world, Dr. Iron Fist, Vitali Klitschko.
With Big Bro Klitschko otherwise occupied, Wladimir stepped up and wiped out the division. He hired Manny Stewart as his trainer and learned to limit opponents' opportunities with his size and length. His most important growth was mental. Wladimir learned how to survive, a trait tested by Sam Peter.
A tremendous battle between Wladimir Klitschko and the new sensation of the division, Samuel Peter. Peter's from Nigeria. The last Nigerian heavyweight who was regarded as having a big future, Ike Ibeabuchi, wound up in jail. Samuel Peter's an entirely different kind of person, just as devastating a fighter. But the question that now hovers over Wladimir, did the flaws he showed in those two disastrous knockout losses disqualify him forever as a legitimate heavyweight contender?
I like that. You're tall, take advantage of your height.
There's a right hand by Klitschko. Landing that right hand shot on Klitschko.
The Nigerian Nightmare was a stocky 6 foot 2 inches and a brutal puncher.
Powerful arm.
There's a big left hook by Peter.
Just do it.
Here's a hard right. You can't hurt me.
But this time, Vlad had the fortitude to hang on.
You gotta do something. This is make something.
Peter hit Klitschko right.
There may have been an earlier.
An all-out war now.
So obviously, he's tired.
Well, he just missed
His left hook.
Now Peter lands a jab. Klitschko. Now Peter. Big right hand by Peter walking into Klitschko's right hand.
Peter looking for one touch, one punch. Next corner didn't tell him that.
And this time, Wladimir in the corner, trying to duck and slip. Klitschko lands a right hand. Peter lands a right hand. Neither man knows.
You're never out of the truth for Klitschko.
Third knockdown of the fight.
Turning the tables, coming through multiple knockdowns to win his title.
Peter, the last round and stand up. A big right hand. Wladimir Klitschko survives. And a boxing
The steel hammer, Wladimir Klitschko.
Vitali returned in 2008 and put a beating on Sam Peter for the vacant WBC title.
Presses fights right from the get-go, and I'll tell you, Wladimir hurt Peter with. He even made it to the ring. You know, Klitschko's accuracy here has been ridiculously good. I mean, he's landed just about everything he's thrown. And you know, Peter, Mike. Now, Sam Peter, we said, is resilient of his fight, of Peter's fight with Wladimir Klitschko. It's just that Vitali's doing so much better, and look at him land those combinations.
Massimo Baravecchio of Italy is a
Muhammad Ali mover, but he's enough. Sam Peter also has pushed his punches.
At this point of the fight, there is a concern. It's all over. Vitali Klitschko with a successful comeback as Sam Peter has quit on his stool in Germany.
The brothers dominated the division as a two-headed champion. Vitali's most commanding performance came against Shannon Briggs.
This is the heavyweight championship of the world. Obey my command at all times.
Briggs, was wird er machen? Hier vorbei, aber den ersten Treffer kassiert er. Großer Ring, den sich Vitali Klitschko hier ausgesucht hat. Schöne Aktion, Treffer oder jede Aktion zumindest. Dreht sich gut raus, da war der Weg wieder lang. Klitschko in die rechte und der Konter. Von Klitschko und nochmal. Gut, der linke Haken voll an den Kinnwinkel.
Just like Vitali, Briggs had an iron chin, on which Vitali landed 350 punches.
Trainer, die würden ihren Box sagen, er kassiert zu viele harte Treffer. Wir gehen in die bessere Alternative. bisschen was nimmt. Noch 10 Sekunden. Das Duell.
While he couldn't knock Briggs down, he may have knocked him crazy. More on this later. Vitali's final fight was in Moscow. He was against a man 13 years younger, a man he knocked down and dominated en route to a cut stoppage. Vitali flew from Moscow to Kiev to organize the opposition of the pro-Russian government in Ukraine. With Vlad once again on his own, the Klitschko era carried on as a solo act, an act haunted by the ghost of Shannon Briggs, who launched a trolling campaign to try and get a crack at the younger brother.
That's right, I'm crazy. Let's go, champ! Hey, Vladimir, come outside. Tell him the champ out here, the real champ out here.
Until getting cooled off.
So, champ, I told you, and when you go, I go. And when you go, I go, champ. And when you go, I go, champ. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, how you doing? I came.
The end of the Klitschko era came at the giant hands of the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury.
I ain't looking for that one punch that's going to knock you out. I'm looking for an accumulation of shots. No matter how many fights you watch in the past, there'll always be something different every time. I'm sat around the table, I'm looking at Vlad, he's looking at me. He knows I'm a serious person, and I know he's a serious operator. There's no disrespect, because I'll bring the best out of you, and you'll bring the best out of me.
Fury's unorthodox style and much fresher legs proved too much for a 39-year-old. Then, as Tyson Fury lived up to his name by getting massively depressed and losing his mind, Fury ballooned up to near 400 pounds before pulling out of a rematch. With the belts all vacated by Tyson Fury's madness, Vlad was given the chance to earn his titles back. All he had to do was defeat the 2012 gold medalist in front of 90,000 of his countrymen. The war at Wembley was the last fight of Vladimir Klitschko's career.
Experience and proven strategies. Switched on and focused now, straight behind that jab. Solid jab and a left Jonathan Banks from that.
He took the young man to school, sweeping the early rounds when Joshua comes out swinging in the fifth to drop him. Vlad hangs on and comes back to remind the young lion he'd been through this before. Dropping Joshua on a clean right hand in the sixth.
What a right hand from Vladimir Klitschko and Joshua. But it is now Vladimir Klitschko again on the verge. Vitali Joshua's hold up on the fire, another left hook from Vladimir Klitschko. For Vladimir Klitschko. And a palm says Anthony Chitta. He's been smashed through Joe Lewis's record. Oh, big shot there. Big shots though at the beginning of the 11th. And Anthony Joshua.
The fight grew into one of the best heavyweight fights in years. Boxing is a young man's game, and youth, as always, will be served. But Vlad got the dignity of going out on his feet with his wits intact.
Surely Joshua is just a punch away. He's a young man, and here he comes. This is great work from Joshua. What fitness, what heart.
Today, the brothers fight for their homeland. Vitali's political activism and position as mayor of Kiev have put him squarely in the Kremlin's crosshairs. What could Vlad do but return to support his brother and country? Many Ukrainian champions felt the same and set boxing aside to fight for Ukrainian independence. A selfless decision, an inspiring show of patriotism. With people like these to defend her, Ukraine will only go out one way: fighting.